The roguelike genre has become one of my favorites in recent years. Games like Hades, Risk of Rain 2, and Into the Breach have captivated me in a way that other games haven't. Getting better at the game is part of the game. It's as if improving is its own mechanic. Getting those lucky runs where you get the perfect combinations of items or upgrades and being able to reach sometimes absurd power levels is always an incredible high for me when it comes to video games. I love these games and have decided to make my own. At the moment, I've decided to call it Delve, as the player will be traversing deeper and deeper floors of old dungeons to achieve their goal. This Devlog 0 of sorts is an introduction to the concept and a way to talk about the planned features and hooks of the game. Development started a while ago now, but I feel that this pitch is a good way to inform people of my current plans and to get some eyes on it early. So without further ado, here is an explanation. The gameplay will look and feel similar to games like Hades. That is, it'll be a top-down isometric dungeon crawler where the player moves from room to room, clearing out enemies and obtaining ability-enhancing items. Additionally, I've decided to make this a rogue-lite, allowing for progression and unlocks across runs. There is one key hook that manifests in the spellcasting system. The spell that the player casts is determined by items they are carrying called tomes. There are 3 types of tomes: Essence, School, and Augmentation, though the first 2 are the most influential. When a player picks up a tome but already has one of that type, the one they were already carrying is dropped. This means that the player only has access to one spell at a time and can't change that spell until they find a new tome. The Essence tome a player is carrying determines what type of magic the spell uses. Currently, these are Arcane, Divine, Natura, and Necrotic. Essence tomes are essential for spellcasting, meaning that if a player is not carrying one, they cannot cast a spell. The School tome determines how the spell is used. The 4 schools of magic are Abjura, Evocum, Transmutia, and Ultimata, which represent Abjuration, Evocation, Transmutation, and Ultimate spells, respectively. Abjura focuses on protecting the player, Evocum is more offensive or DPS oriented, Transmutia spells augment the player's other abilities in some way, and Ultimata spells are extremely powerful but also very rare. If the player is not carrying a School tome but is carrying an Essence tome, they can still cast a very basic, somewhat weak spell. The Augmentation tome adds an additional effect to your spells. For example, enemies killed by your spells might drop more gold. These effects have the potential to be quite numerous and vary widely in terms of both effect type and rarity. Using this relatively simple system, a wide variety of spells can be created. For example, if the player is carrying an Arcane tome and an Evocum tome, they might throw large fireballs that detonate on impact. If they swap that Evocum tome for an Abjura tome, however, they might surround themselves in a magical shield that makes them immune to damage for a short time. This system should also be easy to expand upon later. For example, I could add a conjuration-based school of magic to the system, allowing the player to summon different things dependent on the Essence tome they carry. I do plan to expand this later, whether during development or as a later expansion. The spellcasting is only one part of the game, however. The player's other abilities will be determined by the character they choose to play as. I currently have several ideas for characters and absolutely want to add even more. The characters aren't named at the moment, but their playstyle and abilities have been roughly laid out. One of the characters is a gunslinger who uses their agility and dual spell guns to pick off targets at mid-range. Their secondary ability is a proximity-based explosive trap that they can lay. Another character is a sort of engineer or artificer that uses her tools and ingenuity to build strange magical devices, including a sentry construct that automatically shoots at enemies nearby. I wanted to do something a little different for a melee/tank class instead of having the typical plate armor, sword and board warrior. So I've decided instead to make that character a vampire. He uses his claws, speed, and accelerated healing to brute force his way through enemies. His secondary ability sends him into a frenzied rage fueled by his thirst for blood, boosting his movement speed, and attack damage. Instead of being a more traditional tank, i.e. just having a large health pool, he receives a bit of healing whenever he deals a killing blow, encouraging a very aggressive playstyle. I do have some other character ideas besides the ones I just listed, but I'll save them for a future devlog. I plan for the roster to be expansive enough that there's pretty much something for everyone. The game's theme will take on a high fantasy aesthetic. It's a type of setting that I'm very comfortable working in, and I'm confident that I can create a world that's fun to play in. As far as the game's style is concerned, I want to give it a sort of 2.5D feel while staying primarily in 3D. The game's camera is going to be isometric, and I'd like to try things like cell shading and limiting the 3D animations to 12 frames per second to help achieve the target feel. When it comes to the game's world and how the characters interact with it, I've been particularly inspired by Hades. I enjoy how it manages to ride the line between serious or dramatic and kind of cartoonish the whole time. I already have a pretty good idea of what the game's story will be like, and I think there's plenty of opportunity to work within that kind of niche. Speaking of the game's story, I've got that planned pretty well too. I was scrolling through my YouTube recommended feed a while back and saw Pointy Hat's videos on turning different D&D classes into liches. It got me thinking about what a warlock lich would be like, since the whole theme of a warlock is subservience through a pact with some greater being. Through this thought experiment, I came up with the idea for this game's story. The god of undeath had 4 very powerful servants: a bitter wizard, a corrupt cleric, a dastardly druid, and a terrifying necromancer. He found them each to be both useful to him and quite gullible, so he taught them the rites of lichdom. With their newfound abilities, they act on his command, creating armies of evil with which he plans to conquer the world and turn everyone into undead creatures that he can control. Each of these liches would act as the game's boss fights, providing their own unique theming to the different levels the player fights through. The different liches each use a different essence type, if that wasn't already obvious. I think this is a cool and unique way to tie the game's mechanics to its world, which is something I'd like to find ways of doing more of. While development has started on the game, it's still in the pretty early stages. I plan to upload more in-depth videos showing the development along the way, bugs and all. Also, since this is the first game ever that I'll be releasing, hopefully, I'll also be sharing the major struggles or roadblocks I run into along the way, so that any aspiring indie developers like myself can learn from my mistakes. If you'd like to follow this game's development, the best way to do so would be by subscribing to my KW Games YouTube channel. That's where I'll be posting all of the devlogs. You can also follow KW Games on Twitter and Instagram by following the links in the description. There, I'll notify you when a new devlog is released, and we'll post occasionally about interesting parts of the design or development of the game. By the next devlog, I hope to have the foundations of the spellcasting system implemented and one of the character's abilities properly functional. If things go particularly smoothly, I may even have a preview model sheet for the character I work on, but I think functionality is a higher priority at the moment. Anyway, until next time, thanks for watching.